a piece of a notebook, for example, para ma-take note ninyo yung score ng presenter. Again, except for the reporters, no? Except for the reporters, di ba yung sa mga reporters din, except for the reporters, you are to rate your classmates who presented their topic.
Okay, sir.
Again, please take note of the scoring sheet. I will try to again read my post sa GC, no, about sa rating natin. So that is organization, what else? Organization style, and the other one is content. So if it satisfies kung ano talaga yung kailangan natin sa cellular level of organization. Because as you notice, meron tayong syllabus, and then I really don't know if all of you followed the content of the syllabus, kung ano yung hinihingi doon. Okay. So that is for the content, no? So please try to look at it, no? How about group 2? Group 2 is here. The tissue level of organization. How about group 2? Nandito na ba yung group 2? It's already 11:36. Okay, while waiting, I would like to mention your journal article, everybody. So your journal article will be about the first topic, which is introduction to anatomy and physiology. As I have mentioned to you, any research article that could actually cover any of the topics mentioned during sa ato ang discussion sa introduction to anatomy and physiology is okay. Okay. In a way, I will be right after this session. I will be putting there the title of your topic, no? And then you have to put there your title, and then of course the link of your journal. Okay. Meron din akong nilagay sa resources natin. Yung banda sa classwork, yung banda sa taas, meron doong resources.
Yes, sir.
Meron
Nakita na
akong
mo,
nilagay.
sir.
Yes. Meron akong nilagay doon na parang recommended na or suggested na link for you to search your articles. Okay? Again, ang isa-search na article, siguraduhin meron siyang abstract, meron siyang introduction, meron siyang materials and methods, no? Meron siyang discussion, my conclusion, no? Huwag yung parang plainly introduction and so on kasi iba-iba yan, no? Ibang format. So yung hinahanap natin ay research, no? Especially yung research, I don't know if I mentioned to you, ano tayo, 3 years back na research. So I think we have to count starting, di pa naman nag-end ang year. 2018? Can we have 2018 or starting 2017 na lang? Research starting 2017. Yan yung parang cover ng article. Yung makikita natin yan sa publication. No? Dapat 2017 up to present yung published na article. Claro, children?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sige. I will post it sa stream. Sa stream ko na lang siguro ilalagay yung article title para makikita ninyo yung mga titles ng mga kaklase ninyo para hindi siya mag-duplication, kumbaga. So ano ang gagawin natin, children? Group 1, are you ready, by the way?
Yes po, sir.
Okay, sige.
We are
Ah,
waiting na lang po kay Miss Sahara, sir, kay wala po siyang signal.
okay, sige. But pwede nang maka-screen share, tama?
Yes po, sir.
Okay, sige. Pa-screen share na lang ako, dear. So bali ang gagawin niyo, you will be out of the full article. Dapat naka-full article 'yan, no? Para kasi babasahin niyo 'yan talaga. Full article, and then you will based on your understanding sa research, gawat kayo ng synthesis. Okay. Okay ng synthesis. I'll try to search for a template for a synthesis para hindi kayo masyadong mahirapan. Or kung wala talaga akong mahanap na appropriate na template, you really have to do it, no, on your own. You have to synthesize kung ano yung nabasa niyo sa research. In a way, ang isusulat niyo lang naman ay based on your understanding. Okay? Sige, group 1, your topic is the cellular level of organization. You can now take the floor. Again, classmates na nakikinig, please, you have to find a sheet of paper wherein you can write your, perhaps your questions and of course your rating. Presenters, do not forget to mention your name, huh?
Sir, am I audible po?
Yes, Hanifa, loud and clear.
Visible po ba yung screen?
Yes, dear.
Okay. So, hi everybody and good morning. Good morning, sir. I am Hanifa
Mm.
A. Kalandada, and together with my group mates, Miss Sahara Makala and Miss Sofia Ragundo, we are the first presenter. And our topic is all about the cellular level of organizations. So, as we have tackled and learned in the previous topics, the study of cell is what we call the cytology. And to think that cell is a minute particle, napakaliit lang ng cell, but there are many things that happens inside the cell, and that's what the knowledge that we are going to impart to you in today's session. So the cellular level of organizations. So allow me to present to you the objectives of these chapters. We hope that at the end of these chapters, we are all able to first describe the structure and function of the cell membrane, including its regulation of materials into and out of the cell, describe the functions of the various cytoplasmic organelles, explain the structure and contents of the nucleus as well as the process of DNA replication, explain the process by which a cell builds proteins using the DNA code, list the stages of the cell cycle in order, including the steps of cell division and somatic cells, discuss how a cell differentiates and becomes more specialized, and list the morphological and physiological characteristics of some representative cell types in the human body. So we pray that at the end of our discussion, ma-achieve natin itong objectives na ito. So, as a brief introduction, we are all developed from a single fertilized egg cell into the complex organism containing trillions of cells that you see when you look in a mirror. So as we develop, so during the developmental process, early and undifferentiated cells differentiate and become specialized in their structure and functions. So these different cell types form specialized tissues that work in concert to perform all of the functions necessary for the living organism. Cellular and developmental biologists study how the continued division of a cell, of a single cell, leads to such complexity and differentiation. To understand this more, I have here an examples. So let's try to consider the difference between a structural cell in the skin and the nerve cell. So as you can see, the structural cell, wait lang po, sa So as you can see, the structural cell and the nerve cell has different structures. Meaning to say, their structures are formed to perform specific and specialized functions. Hindi pwede na yung the structures of the nerve cells um, is ma-perform niya yung pina-perform nitong structural cells. So these differences illustrates important theme that is considered at all organizational levels of biology, and that is the form of a structure is optimally suited to perform particular functions assigned to that structure. So, meaning to say, this
Mama Nifa,
yes, sir.
ma'am, paki-click ng hide para mawala yung nasa
Ah,
baba.
okay
Opo.
po, sir. Wait lang po. Paano mag-click?
Okay na yan po. Parang pwede mo rin okay, very good. That's it. Continue, my dear.
Yes. So, I'll repeat na yung differences na ito na I'm talking about is illustrate an important theme that is considered at all organizational levels of biology. And that is, the form of a structure is optimally suited to perform particular functions assigned to that structures. So, a single structure has a specialized and unique functions. So the concept of cell started in an observation that is done by the scientist Robert Hooke in 1665. So Robert Hooke observed a dead cork cell which then he coined na yung nakita niyang observation sa dead cork na yon, tinawag niyang cell without knowing its important kasi kinumpare lang niya itsura nung na-observe niya sa dark cork cell uh, doon sa doon sa cell na tinitirhan ng mga monk. So kaya niya siya tinawag na cell. But later on, after 10 years, Anthony van Leeuwenhoek became the first person to observe living and moving cells under a microscope. So, in the century that followed, the theory that cells represented the basic unit of life would develop. So, that's how the concept of cell evolved in as year passed. So, we have to remember, take note of this, that the primary responsibility of each cell is to contribute to homeostasis. I know that we are all familiar with the word homeostasis as we have already learned it in the previous lesson. But homeostasis is a term used in biology that refers to a dynamic state of balance within parameters that are compatible with life. One thing we should remember, if homeostasis cannot be maintained within tolerance limits, our body cannot function properly. Consequently, we are likely to get sick and may even die. So, who is responsible in maintaining homeostasis inside our body? And that's what I'm going to elaborate more in the next presentation, the cell membrane. So, at the end of this section, I hope you will be able to first describe the molecular components that make up the cell membrane, explain the major features and properties of the cell membrane, differentiate between materials that can and cannot diffuse through the lipid bilayer, and compare and contrast different types of passive transport with active transport, providing examples of each. So as I am saying, cell membrane is very important in maintaining homeostasis because cell membrane enables organism to maintain homeostasis by regulating the materials that may enter or leave a cell. So as you can see in the picture, ito yung structure ng cell membrane. So meron silang parang mga phosphorus that are uh, ba, nas, naka ano sila sa isa't isa, but and if we try to zoom this parang phosphoro, this is how it looks like. So we have to remember that the cell membrane is an extremely pliable structure composed primarily of back-to-back phospholipids or a bilayer. So this is what we call the phospholipids, and they are back-to-back to each other, and they primarily compose the cell membrane. So this is what we call the phospholipids. This one is what we call the phosphate groups or the head of the phospholipids. We must remember that the phosphate group or the head is negatively charged, meaning to say it is polar, making it to hydrophilic. When we say hydrophilic, it is water loving, meaning they attract water. While this one here is what we call the lipid tails. And the straight one composed of saturated fatty acid, and this one is contains of unsaturated fatty acid. And the lipid tails is uncharged, making it to non-polar. uh, Ibig sabihin, they are hydrophobic. When we say hydrophobic, they are water-fearing, meaning to say they repels and repelled by water. I have also included here a word amphipathic. When we say amphipathic, it contains both a hydrophilic and hydrophobic region, meaning to say this phospholipids, itong bilayer na ito as a whole, is what we is amphipathic because it consists of um, hydrophilic region, which is the head, and hydrophobic region, which is the lipid tails. So here is because the phosphate group or the head is polar and they attract water. Ay, wait. So as you can see, the lipid tails of one layer face the lipid tails of one another. So ito yung parang mas elaborate na structure ng mga phospholipids. So as you can see, yung tails dito sa one layer is facing or facing the one layer of itong dito na layer. While the phosphate group or the head face outward. So this one is exposed, itong isang ito na mga phosphate heads is exposed to the interior of the cell, while itong nandito na medyo hindi visible is exposed to the exterior of the cell, making it to yung dito na head is attracted to the fluid or water in the intracellular fluid or ICF. While itong nandito sa nandito sa part na to, which is sa exterior part of the cell, is attracted to the fluid in the extracellular fluid. So extracellular fluid or ECF is the fluid environment outside the enclosure of the cell membrane. And the term interstitial fluid is given to extracellular fluid not contained with blood vessels. So it is the fluid that surrounds the cell and separate from the blood vessels. The interstitial fluid or IF contains water, acid, proteins, salt, hormones, electrolytes, and waste materials. So moving on, let us get to know the proteins in the membrane, or what we call the membrane proteins. Membrane proteins are either part or interact with biological membrane, and it make up around one third of human proteins. So basically, there are two different types of proteins commonly associated with cell membrane, and they are the integral proteins and the peripheral proteins. Integral proteins are the permanent part of the membrane. It is embedded in the membrane. One example of integral protein is what we call the channel protein, which selectively allows particular materials such as certain ions to pass into or out of the cell. So mapili po yung ating mga phospholipids kung ano lang yung papapasukin nila doon sa cell. So the receptor is the type of recognition proteins that can selectively bind a specific molecule outside the cell, and this binding includes a chemical reaction within the cell. While ligand is the term used to specific molecule that binds to and activates a receptor. While glycoproteins, as you can see, ito yung itsura niya, it is an integral membrane proteins that has carbohydrate molecules attached within extend into the extracellular matrix. And glycocalyx is the fuzzy appearing coating around the cell formed from glycoproteins and other carbohydrates attached to the cell membrane. So the glycocalyx can have various roles, and it covers bacteria cell wall, and it is made inside the cell and secreted to the cell surface. While the peripheral proteins are peripheral proteins is transiently associated with either the membrane or integral proteins. So peripheral proteins are typically found on the inner or outer surface of the lipid bilayer, but can also be attached to the internal or external surface of an integral proteins. So these proteins are typically perform a specific function for the cell. So every nandi every components nitong integral proteins and the integral proteins have different and unique functions that they perform. So cell is, as we all know, cell is not an isolated little world. They have a lot of organs. They have a lot going inside them. They also need to interact with their environment. But since cell membrane is selectively permeable, so not everything can enter the cell, we have this so-called transport inside the cell membrane. So all substances that move through the membrane do so by one of two general methods, which are categorized whether or not energy is required. And the first category is what we call the passive transport. The passive transport doesn't require any energy to force molecules in or out of the cell. So some molecules have no problem going throughout the cell membrane and directly go through the phospholipid bilayers. Very small nonpolar molecules fit in this category and are a great examples like sun gases, oxygen, carbon dioxide gas. So this is known as diffusion or simple diffusion. So simple diffusion moves in flow, meaning it moves with concentration gradients. This one here, concentration gradient. So molecules move from a high concentration to a low concentration. So when you hear someone saying something's going with the concentration gradients, that's what they mean. So the molecules move from high concentration from low concentration. That is the natural flow na that is the natural flow. So concentration gradient, meaning to say, it is the color grid it is the difference in concentration of a substance across a space. So it's either uh, from high concentration and low, from concentration to low concentration. But there are also proteins in the membrane, and some of them are transport proteins. Some transport proteins act as channels. Some of these proteins actually change their shape to get things across. Some of them open and close based on some kind of stimulus. All of these are good things because it's helping with molecules that may be too big to cross the membrane with their own, or molecules that are polar, such as glucose. So when yung glucose needed to enter our cell, it need the help of what we call the facilitated diffusion. So facilitated diffusion, still a diffusion, and it still does not require energy, but it also moves with the concentration gradient of high to low. It is a process used for those substances that cannot cross lipid bilayer due to their size, charge, and polarity. So if an material, or for example yung glucose, is very big siya na particles, or molecules, so hindi siya basta-basta nakaka-enter sa cell, so as a phospholipids, so it needs the help of facilitated diffusion. And water also can move freely across the cell membrane of all cells, either through protein channels or by shipping between lipid tails of the membrane itself. So it is the job of osmosis. Osmosis is the diffusion of water through a semi-permeable membrane. So So these are the word related to osmosis. I think sa mga classmate ko dyan, we are already familiar with osmosis kasi parang nagkaroon tayo ng laboratory or experiment sa osmosis. But when we say isotonic, it is a two solution that have the same concentration of solutes. So when cell and their extracellular environment are isotonic, the concentration of the molecule is the same outside and inside the cells, and the cell maintains their normal shape or functions. So isotonic balance siya. While in hypotonic, when a solution it has a lower concentration of solutes than another, is said to be hypotonic. So water tend to diffuse out of hypotonic solution. So cells in hypotonic will take on too much water and swell, with the risk of eventually bursting. So yung sa hypotonic, the yung concentration ng solute is lower. So the molecules tend to diffuse out of the hypotonic solution. So ang mangyayari sa cell is magkakaroon siya ng too much water hanggang sa lumobo na siya, and the risk is it will eventually burst. While hypertonic, hypertonic is when the solution is when a solution that has a higher concentration of solutes than another solution is said to be hypertonic. So a higher concentration of solute naman yung hypertonic. So water molecule tend to diffuse into hypertonic, the reason why it causing the cell to shrink. So yun yung mga nangyayari when sa osmosis, including isotonic, hypotonic, hypertonic. So what we can learn about this is that one critical aspect of homeostasis in living things is to create an internal environment in which all of the body's cells are in an isotonic solution. Kasi yung isotonic balance siya eh. So this is simple. This is how simple diffusion works: facilitated diffusion and the osmosis. So as you can see dun sa hypertonic, yung water molecules is parang they are going sa hypertonic solution. The water molecules tends to diffuse into hypertonic solution. So yung sa isotonic balance siya, and then the hypotonic yung water molecules parang they enter the hypotonic solution. So all things we've mentioned has been passive in nature. That means it's going from high to low concentration. But what if we want to go the other way? So from low concentration to high concentration. So the movement of molecule from low to high concentration takes energy because that's against the flow. As I've said, yung normal flow is from high concentration to low concentration. But when the movement of molecule from low to high concentration takes place, then it requires energy because it is against the flow. So typically, it's going to require ATP or adenosine triphosphate. And a reminder that ATP has three phosphate. So when the bond for the last phosphate is broken, it releases a great amount of energy. So ATP can power active transport. So it forces molecules to go against their concentration gradients. And one way it can do that is actually energizing the transport protein itself. So one of the example of active transport is the sodium potassium pump. Sodium potassium pump is a protein that has been identified in many cells that maintains the internal concentration of potassium ions higher than in the surrounding medium. The surrounding medium are the blood, body fluid, and water, and maintains the internal concentration of sodium ions lower than of the surrounding medium. So,
Hanifa,
yes, sir.
that is supposed to be sodium, right?
Yes, sir. Sodium.
Mm.
Ay, sorry. Calcium, potassium. Wait. Calcium, potassium pump. Sodium. Oh my. I'm so sorry, guys. This is
So it's
sodium.
okay anyway. Sila,
This,
in a way, na-mention mo naman kanina.
yes, this is sodium potassium pump po.
Okay, see, continue.
Yes. So in the passive transport we while nabanggit ko dun sa passive transport yung concentration gradient na word. So in active transport we have what we call the electrical gradient. So it is the difference in electric charge across the space. So when we talk about electrical gradients, we are talking about the difference in electric charge. So, other form of active transport do not involve membrane carriers. So, let's say a cell needs a very large molecules. For example, a polysaccharides. So, when a cell needs polysaccharides to enter, it needs the cell membrane to fuse with the molecules it's taking in to bring it inside. So this is called endocytosis. So think of endo as in. So often, this fusing of substances with the cell membrane will form vesicles that can be taken inside the cell. So there are different type of endocytosis depending on how the cell is bringing substances inside. So the first type is the phagocytosis. Uh, Phagocytosis is cell eating. It is the endocytosis of large particles. So any large particles that will enter the uh, that will enter the cell, just like the polysaccharides will need to yung yung phagocytosis, uh, parang it engulf uh, in large particles. In contrast with phagocytosis, we have pinocytosis. It is cell drinking. Pinocytosis is cell drinking. It brings fluid containing dissolved substances into a cell through membrane vesicles. So, there are other forms such as the fancy receptor mediated endocytosis. So itong receptor mediated endocytosis, very picky ito kung kung anong materials ang papapasukin, or kung ano yung palalabasin. So very picky siya. So it works in receptor mediated endocytosis. It is where cells can be very picky about what's coming in, because the incoming substances are actually have to bind to receptors to even get it. Imagine that yung sa receptor mediated endocytosis, every materials na yung papasok is kailangan pang uh, mag-bind doon sa mga receptors to actually get in. So that's how receptor-mediated endocytosis work. And exocytosis is the reverse direction of endocytosis. So this is when molecules exit. So think of exo as exit. So exocytosis can be used to get rid of cell waste, but it's also really important for getting important materials out that the cell has made. So that's how exocytosis is necessary. So this is how potassium this is how sodium potassium pump works. And ito naman yung sa endocytosis and the exocytosis. So exocytosis, so after that, I think it's about time to dive inside of a prototypical human cell to learn about its internal components and their function. So I have here the cytoplasm and cellular organelles. So at the end of this section, I hope we are all able to first describe the structure and function of the cellular organelles associated with the endomembrane system, including the endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, and lysosomes, describe the structure and function of mitochondria and peroxisomes, and explain the three components of the cytoskeleton, including their composition and function. So I have here a picture, although it is not an indicative of any one particular human cell. It is a prototypical example of a cell containing the primary organelles and internal structures. So, cytosol. A cytosol is the jelly-like substance within the cell. It provides the fluid medium necessary for biochemical reaction. So, eukaryotic cells, including all animal cells, also contain various of cellular organelles. So, when we hear of the word organelle, it means little organs. So,
Hanifa,
yes, sir.
we pronounce it as organelle.
Yeah. Okay po, sir.
Organelles. It's okay.
Organelle.
Oh, yes. Organelle or organelles in plural. Okay.
Organelles. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes. So when we hear about the word organelles, it means a little organ. So it is one of the several different type of membrane enclosed bodies in the cell, and each performing a unique function. So every organelles uh, have dif- uh, have different unique functions that they perform. So just as the organelles and together and cytosol taken together compose the cell cytoplasm. Excuse me, sir.
Sige. Para, ang dami nyo dyan.
Am I audible po?
Yes, yes, yes.
So, again, the organelles and cytosol taken together compose the cell's cytoplasm. And the nucleus is a cell's central organelles which contains the cell's DNA. So let us move on to the organelles of the endomembrane system and let us know their functions. So a set of three major organelles together form a system within the cell called the endomembrane system. So these organelles work together to perform various cellular jobs, including the task of producing, packaging, and exporting certain cellular products. So the first organelles in the endomembrane system is the uh, endoplasmic reticulum or ER. So endoplasmic reticulum is a system of channels that is continuous with the nuclear membrane, covering the nucleus and composed of the same lipid bilayer materials. So, so as you can see, ganito yung structure ng parang endoplasmic reticulum. It is winding or twisted. So parang we can compare the structure ng endoplasmic reticulum sa water canal na meron sa Venice. Meron po akong sinave na picture. Allow me to show it. So
Yes,
parang
dear.
Yes. So parang ganto po siya. So kung titingnan natin yung water canal sa Venice is parang itong structure niya is katulad din ng meron katulad din ng structure ng endoplasmic reticulum. So, OMG. So endoplasmic reticulum, wait.
Yan.
The endoplasmic reticulum provides passages throughout much of the cell that function in transporting, synthesizing, and storing materials. And it can be it exists in two forms. It is whether rough ER or smooth ER. So the rough ER has a ribosome, which is an organelles that serve as the site of protein synthesis, while smooth ER lack a ribosome. So walang ribosome yung smooth ER, while the rough ER has a ribosome. So while the main function of smooth ER is in the synthesis of lipids, the smooth ER synthesizes phospholipids, the main component of biological membranes, as well as steroid hormones. While in contrast with the smooth ER, the primary job of the rough ER is the synthesis and modification of proteins destined for the cell membrane or for export from the cell. So, typically, a protein is synthesized with the ribosome and released inside the channel of the rough ER, where sugars can be added to it before it is transported with a vesicle to the next stage in the packaging and shipping processes. So after sa rough ER is the Golgi apparatus. The Golgi
Yeah, some idea. Some references they actually or some people would pronounce it as
Yes, sir.
Golgi, no Golgi or
Golgi.
Golgi. So that yeah, Golgi or Golgi. So anyway, we stick to. I think we stick more on Golgi.
Oh,
I
okay,
love it
sir.
na pronouncing Golgi. Okay, dear, go.
Yes, sir. So, the Golgi apparatus is responsible for sorting, modifying, and shipping of the products that come from the rough ER. So, every materials that comes from the rough ER will meron siguro ako. So every materials na meron sa rough ER will then go to the Golgi apparatus. Then yung Golgi apparatus ang gagawin niya, it store it and it modify uh, those things, and then after parang ship niya to different places. So parang masasabi natin na the Golgi apparatus is like a post office sa cell. Kasi it parang yung nare-receive niya na materials na from rough ER, i-modify niya nun and isa-sort niya, and then it will going to send it to different places. So that's the job of the Golgi apparatus. Another organelles of the endomembrane system is the lysosome. So a lysosome is an organelle that contains enzyme that break down and digest unneeded cellular components such as damaged organelle. So, ang job ng lysosome is to digest wait, is to break down or digest yung mga hindi na kailangan or mga damaged na organelles. So, the word autophagy is the process of a cell digesting its own structure. So, autophagy is a cell is a self-eating cell, while autolysis is a self-destruct mechanism of a cell. So, under certain circumstances, lysosomes perform a more grand and dire functions. So, in this case of damaged or unhealthy cells, lysosome can be triggered to open up and release their digestive enzymes into the cytoplasm of the cell, killing the cell. So, the self-destructive mechanism is what we call the autolysis. So, moving on to the organelles for energy production and detoxification. So, these are the first organelles for energy production and detoxification is the mitochondria. Mitochondria is the plural term for mitochondrion. Mitochondria is are a membrane-bound cell organelles that generate most of the chemical energy needed to power the cell's biochemical reactions. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and every chemical energy produced by the mitochondria is a small molecule called ATP or adenosine triphosphate. So, yung energy na napoproduce, yung chemical energy na pinoproduce ng mitochondria is actually a small molecule, and we call it ATP or adenosine triphosphate. So, another organelles for energy production is the peroxisomes. The function of peroxisome includes lipid metabolism and chemical detoxification. So it helps break down very long fatty acids, it helps form phospholipids, and it reduces the reactive oxygen species, or ROS, or also known as free radicals. So uh, the very important function of peroxisomes is it neutralizes harmful toxins so that they do not wreak havoc in the cell. So parang nag-detoxify yung peroxisome. So the it also reduce the reactive oxygen species, which can cause permanent damage to cellular lipids, proteins, carbohydrates, and nucleic acids. So damaged DNA can lead to genetic mutation and even cancer. So when we say mutation, it is a change in the nucleotide sequence in a gene within a cell's DNA, potentially altering the protein coded by the genes. So the function of peroxisomes is very important in order para yung mga harmful toxins or materials cannot enter or cannot cause havoc, wreak havoc inside our cell. So the last organelles in that the last organelles for energy production and detoxification is the cytoskeleton. So the cytoskeleton is a group of fibrous proteins that provide structural support for cells. But this is only one of the functions of the cytoskeleton. So cytoskeletal components are also critical for cell motility, cell reproduction, and transportation of substances within the cell. So cytoskeleton forms a complex thread-like network. Kung mapapansin nyo, yung sa picture, parang it forms a complex thread-like network throughout the cell consisting of three different kinds of protein-based filaments. So the first one, the letter A, itong green na ito, is what we call the microtubules. Microtubules is the thickest of the three protein-based filaments. So the microtubules maintain the cell shape and structures. So it helps resist compression of the cell and play a role in positioning the organelles within the cell. So, and the letter So the very important function of microtubules is to set the paths along with which the genetic material can be pulled during cell division so that each new daughter cell receives the appropriate set of chromosomes. Another type of the protein-based filament is what we call the microfilament. Itong red na ito is what we call the microfilament. So, parang this is what compose a microfilament. So, microfilament is a thinner type of cytoskeletal filament. So, actin, a protein that forms chains, these are actin, is the primary component of this microfilament. So actin also has an important role during cell division. When a cell is about to split in half during cell division, actin filament work with myosin to create a cleavage furrow that eventually splits the cell down the middle. So it will form two new cells from the origin cell. And the final cytoskeletal, I mean, the final cytoskeletal filament is what we call the intermediate filament. So, as its name would suggest, an intermediate filament is a filament intermediate in thickness between the microtubules and microfilaments. So, intermediate filaments are made up of long fibrous subunits of a protein called keratin. So kung titingnan natin siya, para lang siyang ah, para siyang yung sugar na parang pag natuyo is mag ganyan. And and unlike the wait lang. Intermediate filaments are made up of fibrosubunits of protein called keratin that are wound together like the threads that compose a rope. So yon. Uh, so intermediate filaments in concert with the microtubules are important for maintaining cell shape and structure. So yun yung importance ng intermediate filament. So it also maintain cell shape and cell structure. So that's all. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something today.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss Anifa. Before the next reporter will continue, anyway, we still have 30 minutes, and then I would like to emphasize some of
Okay, sir.
the concepts mentioned by Hanifa. No, I think really
Hmm.
Hanifa prepared it
Yes.
well. No, of course, we know the strategy of Hanifa. No, Hanifa, and how she do it. But then again, you would notice that everything is actually the flow of the discussion is very seamless. No? Thank you so much, by the way, Miss Hanifa, and I would like to emphasize, no, for the charged and in charge, no, na kuan. Can you go back to the picture of
Where,
the
sir?
cell membrane, please?
Okay, sir. Here, sir.
Ah, yes, yes, yes. Okay, I remember Miss Hanifa mentioned about the structure of your what do you call this? Our cell membrane. No? Please take note, everyone, that kasi na-mention kasi kanina ni Hanifa nga the head of the phospholipid is positive. No? I think positive yung na-mention niya. Positive lang ata yung na-mention niya. Or something
Sir,
negative ba? No?
negative.
Uh, negative yung na-mention niya. Please take note that it's not really negative lang. No? The point there is the head of of your phospholipid is charged. In a way, na-mention din niya ni Hanifa, no? That the head of the tail, the head of the tail, the head of the phospholipid is actually charged, no? Ibig sabihin ng charge, it's either positive or negative. Nakanimili sa structure. But if we're going to look at here, our phosphate head, that is of course negative. But it doesn't mean na negative lang yung charge niya. Because the reason why your head, no, the head of your lipid, no, or the phospholipid is considered to be hydrophobic, no, hydrophobic, no, because of the charged particles, no, hydrophobic siya. Hindi siya pwede ang water dito. Now, for the case of the tail is uncharged. There is no charge. Sorry.
Hydro.
Sorry. The outside part is hydrophilic. Or is it?
The head
Ayan.
po.
The head is hydrophilic.
Hydrophilic.
Yes, again, that is.
Charge po. Mayroon pong charge yung head, but it's either positive or negative.
Okay. That is why your head, according to the structure, this is hydrophilic, no? Water loving siya kasi pwede siya may attract to the water molecule, hydrophilic, no? And then hydrophobic, meaning to say water fearing, ang ato ang center, dili dapita. Okay. Okay, hydrophobic tails, okay? That's the reason why the entrance and then the exit of the materials, meron tayong problema dyan, no? Because of the molecular structure of the tails of your hydrophobic. And of course, we are very familiar the term amphipathic, no? Sige. Another one is that I would like to ask Miss Sanifa, what is the reason why your cell membrane is considered to be semi-permeable?
Sir?
What makes the cell membrane semi-permeable?
Because it doesn't parang namimili po siya ng materials that will enter the phospholipids in order uh, to maintain homeostasis kasi po very yung cell membrane has a very important role in maintaining homeostasis. So kung hindi po semi permeable yung cell membrane natin, so every materials that will enter the phospholipids or our cells can enter. So, parang magkakaroon ng imbalance. So, if there is an imbalance of homeostasis, so we are likely to suffer from disease and uh, more likely even die. So, yun po yung ano,
That's actually the nice nature of your cell membrane because not all materials can enter and of course exit your cell membrane. No, we can't imagine. No, we really can't imagine if our cell membrane is permeable, as in total permeable. Meaning to say, all molecules, all materials, even viruses can just enter your cell. No, okay. Okay, meron question dito si Elmer. How does temperature affects diffusion rate now?
how does temperature affect
Mhm.
diffusion?
Meron ba? Meron bang effect ang temperature sa diffusion rate?
And we didn't know about that. So, how
Okay, baka
does
anybody from the group?
does temperature affect diffusion? Does temperature
Anybody from the group? How does temperature affect diffusion rate? Okay, wala.
Sir,
Anyway, yes, dear. Yes, Sahara.
I think the higher the temperature, the higher the rate of diffusion.
Okay, no, we actually have that. No, is that correct? Is that correct, Elmer?
Hello, good morning po. Di
Yes,
ba Hani ba kasi mentioned earlier that diffusion is a movement of molecules from a high to low concentration. That is why
mm,
I nag-question po ako how does a temperature
po?
I do.
Ano yung
okay.
Elmer, can you repeat yung sa ano? From
Elmer, can
Yes sir,
you?
yes, correct po.
I what I mean is yung hindi high or low temperature, what I am saying is low concentration or from high concentration to low concentration, which is yung normal flow ng molecules sa uh, normal flow ng molecules. So kapag yun yung flow, it does not require energy. So parang yung transport is passive. So
Okay.
kabilang na po doon yung diffusion.
Okay. Anyway, thank you so much. Anyway, when it comes to diffusion rate naman, in the concept of physics, in the concept of chemistry,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, in the concept of chemistry naman, there has to be a factor no, for the diffusion rate, and I think temperature is part of it. And Miss Sahara mentioned about the diffusion rate. Now, according to her, that the diffusion daw will actually increase when there is an increase in the temperature. That is actually true. No, given in a very normal setup. No, because in chemistry, kasi you can play everything. Okay, so that's in the concept of chemistry, naman. For here, I think the diffusion is more on cellular level. So I don't think so that really we can check if really temperature affects the diffusion rate. But again, meron siyang effect. Okay.
Yes,
So
sir.
thank you for the question, Elmer. Okay. I would like to remind everyone that when we say concentration gradient, we are actually referring to the normal flow of material. So ibig sabihin, the flow of the material is from high to low. Okay? Pag sinasabing concentration gradient, automatically that is with the flow of the material is from high concentration to low concentration area. That is why if we are to remember the discussion of Hanifa about active transport, she mentioned about concentration against the gradient, no? Meaning to say, yung active transport daw kasi ang flow ng kanyang material is against the concentration gradient. Ibig sabihin, opposite. Ibig sabihin, from low concentration area to high concentration area. Again, the normal way of putting concentration gradient is from higher to low concentration area. If we say against the concentration gradient, therefore we are now using active transport. Okay, at some point because meron pa tayong mga facilitated diffusion and so on. Now for osmosis naman, I would like to emphasize that if in diffusion, yung materials natin ay most likely ano ba, mga mga materials, no, mga molecules, no, yung nagta-transfer for diffusion. For osmosis naman, water, no? Water movement ang osmosis. Now, ang concept naman ng osmosis is ang movement sa water actually depends on the concentration of the solute. Okay? Let's try to go to the next slide, yung number 11 na slide, my dear. Yan, okay? So if we're going to look at here our osmosis, ang sabi dito movement of water. Now, paano ba natin malalaman kung merong movement of water? If the other side, no, of the container or meron tayong outside at saka inside, no? If the other one, no, the other area is greater yung solute niya or mas maliit yung solute niya. Now, the concept of osmosis, no, this is actually very basic when it comes to transport, no, transportation across the cell membrane. Ang pag-travel ng water is from the low solute concentration to high solute concentration. So it's kind of confusing, but please imagine, okay, osmosis, I'll type it siguro, no? Movement of water from low solute because the reference point of osmosis is the solute concentration. Okay. Kanina kasi sa diffusion ang ano lang natin, ang emphasis lang natin is more on the concentration of something. Okay? So for osmosis is the solute concentration to high solute concentration. Net ko sa chat, no? So ang osmosis, again, movement of water from low solute concentration to high solute concentration. Now, that is the reason why nabigyang emphasis ni Hanifa yung tatlong types of osmosis. We have actually hypertonic. In the middle, of course, is your isotonic, and then we have hypotonic. So ano bang ibig sabihin? Kung titingnan natin yung illustration na nandito sa presentation ni Hanifa, yung water for hypertonic ay lumabas. Ibig sabihin, children, the solute concentration, if we're going to compare the solute concentration of the outside environment of the cell and then the inside of the cell, saan ba dito ang mas may greater na solute concentration? Inside or outside? Inside the cell or outside the cell? Hypertonic. Saan kaya yung mas may mataas na solute concentration? Outside the cell or inside the cell? I am talking about hypertonic. Based on the illustration. Yeah. Is it true that in the isotonic state, the cell stays the same? Yeah. No, kasi kaya tinawag siyang iso, meaning to say iso, ibig sabihin balance, no? No change of the state of the cell, no? In terms, please remember everybody that your cell has a specific shape, and if the shape will not conform to their specific shape, it will not function, no, for this particular for that particular function. Okay? So for isotonic, since meron tayong balance of the solute concentration in the outside and then the inside of the cell, therefore ang flow sa water is seamless, no? Papasok, labas yung water. Okay? So ang atong cell will stay the same. But this is not the same with the case of hypertonic and hypotonic. If we're going to look at the arrow sa picture sa presentation ni Hanifa sa hypotonic, ang arrow ay nasaan ba yung arrow? Ano yung direction ng arrow sa hypertonic? Everybody. Ang arrow asa man padulong.
Sa hypertonic, sir?
Hypertonic, yes, sa hypertonic.
Outside the cell po, sir.
Outside the cell, no? If we're gonna look at here, ang arrow na to sa water kay niadto siya outside the cell. Therefore, saan kaya ang may mas maraming solute concentration? Outside the cell or inside the cell?
Outside the cell.
Okay,
My
this is
height,
out,
yeah.
no? Outside the cell. Okay. Children, please take note. Hypertonic is experiencing this one because there is a greater amount of solute concentration on the outside of the cell. That is why if we are gonna look at if we're to look at again the definition or the mechanism of osmosis, that this is the movement of water from low solute concentration to high solute concentration, mo nang mugawas ang atong tubig sa cell. Kaya naman, muadto siya, no? Patungo siya sa mas maraming solute concentration. Nonetheless, if we're going to look at hypotonic, sa hypotonic naman, kung titingnan natin yung arrow, nasa, no? Saan siya patungo yung arrow, by the way? Sa hypotonic?
Inside the cell
Everybody,
po, sir.
inside the cell, okay? Therefore, we can say that there is a greater amount of solute inside the cell. Mao nang ang ato ang water will flow inside the cell. And for most cases, this cell will burst, no? Okay? Will burst. Nakadepende na lang kung plant cell ni siya. Kaya kung sa plant cell kasi, mas malaki kasi yung container, no, ng plant cell. But for our case here, for animal cells, we actually have we cannot hold much water. That is why for most of the cells magburst gina siya. And then if magburst ang cell, no, sa tua, detrimental ang effect ana. It could actually kill the organism or the person. Okay? And that is for osmosis. Okay. I think that's all. Thank you. Any questions so far? You can ask questions to Hanifa or you can ask the question to me. Okay.
Yes.
No questions? Okay, you can now stop presenting, my dear Hanifa. Or
Yes,
susunod,
sir.
yan pa rin yung gagamiting PowerPoint.
Ay.
In a way, it's 12:47. Can you, siguro at tatapusin na natin yung time. Can we go to the next presenter?
Hello, sir. Good afternoon. Good
Ah,
noon.
yes, Elmer. Ay, nag-delay. Na-delay si Elmer. Elmer, i-type na lang daw.
Sir, galibog ko, sir, about bitaw sa about sa definition of sa osmosis kay sa sa among biology kasi last time ilang gi-define ang osmosis as a type of diffusion, movement of water molecules from a high to low concentration. Tapos sa imong definition po, sir, kay low solute concentration to high. So parihara ba siya, sir, sa ba? Di ko ka-gets.
No. Yeah, actually, ang goal dito, if we're going to look at again the definition. Ano yung definition ng teacher ninyo? Osmosis is a type of diffusion. Yes, it's actually a type of diffusion. And then,
A type of diffusion, a movement of water molecules from a high to low concentration po.
okay, kung yan lang yung definition niya, I think meron tayong magiging problema. Kasi technically, if we're going to look at from high to low concentration, we cannot explain the different types of osmosis, no? May kulang kasi what we are to look at here is this one, the solute. Okay? So, if you are gonna use this definition, yung definition na nasa chat, okay? If you're gonna use that definition, you can actually explain or we can explain kung ano yung nangyari doon sa hypertonic at saka hypotonic. Tama ba? Can you easily identify the reason or determine the reason bakit yan yung nangyayari sa hypertonic at saka hypotonic by using this one? By using that definition? Itong definition na sinulat ko.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yes, mas madali ba? Mas madali? Kasi if we're going to use the yung definition lang na osmosis is a type of diffusion, the flow of material is from high concentration to low concentration, that's actually very vague. No, kay technically man ang movement, ang tinitingnan kasi natin is ang movement of water. I think meron pa yung isang definition. I think you have to go back siguro kung meron kayong nag-take note kayo during sa discussion ng inyong teacher, siguro you have to go back kasi meron yung keyword, no? Meron yung keyword kasi ang water movement kasi hindi kasi siya nagfo-flow from higher concentration to low concentration. I do not know kung anong ibig sabihin niya doon. Okay. Kasi ang goal kasi natin dito is
Akong gipangita sir, movement from high to low concentration di ay through a semi-permeable membrane diri sir, nakabutang diri
ano sa to
from high to low concentration through a semi-permeable membrane.
same gihapon. The same gihapon high to low concentration. Okay. Sige, pakitaan ta mo og ano mahuman na pa itong time no.
Sorry kayo sir.
Okay na kayo. You know, this is the purpose why we are doing this. Yeah, here. Mag-screen share ako. Okay. At nawala yung asa to? Ayun, osmosis. Okay? Are you still there, everybody?
Yes, sir.
Yes sir po.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's take this example. Tingnan niyo yung picture. Tingnan mo yung picture ha. Okay. We have here a bottle. Actually, it's iko ano beaker. Dako jud kay nga beaker, marag 1 liter or 2 liter siguro ni. Okay, dito na lang. Kaya na lang siya. No, try to look at it. No? Of course, the same with our cell. May napag siya semi-permeable. Please take note that the focus here is water movement. Okay, para lang medyo mas ma-imagine, no? Actually, ito yung ginawa ko, kaya ko mas naintindihan yung concept ng osmosis. Kasi before, parang nag-interchange yung konsepto ko ng diffusion at saka osmosis. No, kasi yung diffusion, iba yung material ng kanyang, iba yung material na kanyang dinadala. They say, which is different from osmosis, kasi sa osmosis kasi, movement kasi siya ng water. Water alone. Movement of solvent. Okay. Now, try to look at here, this one. We have here a beaker. Okay, we have beaker and then a second beaker. Anyway, isa lang yan pero parang pinakita lang sa inyo kung ano yung mangyayari later. Take note that the red here is your solute molecules. Okay? Now try to look at again your red circles here are your solute molecules. And then of course you have here your green lines. This is your semi-permeable membrane. And then the other one, meron tayong another solute molecules. Now, I would like to ask, saan yung may mas maraming circles? Letter A or letter B? Nakikita ba yung cursor ko? Everybody, are you still there?
Yes sir, makita
Yes,
na
sir.
sir.
Okay, no? Saan dito yung may mas maraming red circles? A or B?
B po, sir.
B, sir.
Okay, this one, no? This on this side. So that is why sinabi dito na meron siyang low concentration to high concentration, my dear. Now, if we are to stick sa definition ng teacher ninyo that osmosis is the flow of water from high to low concentration, hindi sana ito yung mangyayari. Because this is concentration. Nandito yung low concentration, nandito yung high concentration. Now, kung if we are to stick again sa definition ng inyong teacher, meaning to say, the water movement will go here. If you are to look at the output, ang water pumunta dito. Why? Because the focus of osmosis is water movement. According to here, osmosis is the movement of solvent, no, aside from water, but for here water yung gagamitin natin as solvent, from low to high solute concentration. Okay, pag yun yung gagamitin nating concentration, ay hindi pwede, no, kulang talaga yon na definition. Nakuha? Nakuha
Yes,
kaya? Another picture, kung titingnan niyo itong picture na ito, ayan, yung picture na yan. This is diffusion. We have high concentration to low yung pag-travel niya. Okay. The same with ano lang naman, yung osmosis. Saan yung flow ng water? No? We have here pure water, and then this is a solution. Okay? Solution, meron yang, pag sinasabing solution ha, this is now a mixture of a solute and then a solvent. Okay. Now, saan pumunta yung water? Doon sa solution. Why? Because there is a lot of solute here compared to here. Okay? Because the basis of the water movement is the number of solute concentration. Para lang merong emphasis, no? Solute yung basis natin. Kaya kanina, nakita talaga sa picture natin ito, okay? Kaya ito talaga mas madali nating maintindihan, no? Bakit yung water ay lumabas sa cell during hypertonic? Why? Because ang salts, sorry. Why? Because the solute is greater here compared to the inside of the cell. That is why according to, if we're going to stick, no, sa definition ng osmosis, that's the reason why water will go out, no? Because mas daghay solute sa gawas. For hypotonic naman, mas marami ang solute concentration sa loob ng cell. That is why papasok yung water dito sa cell. Okay, kasi nga mas marami ang solute concentration dito. Okay, I think the very good example of hypotonic, no, is kining ato ang hypotonic ba? Sabay mas maraming ions. I think during a change, no, sa osmosis, yung maliligo tayo sa dagat, and then pag nakababad tayo ng sobra, no, and then you would notice na yung parang sa kamay ninyo dito, no, sa tip,
yes, sir. May
siguro
mga wrinkles
may
parang
mga
may
may mga wrinkles, no? That's actually the mechanism of osmosis, no? Kasi nga saan kaya mas maraming solute concentration? Saan kaya mas marami pag nakaligo ka ng dagat? Saan kaya ang may maraming solute concentration? Sa labas or sa loob ng katawan? Saan kaya mas marami? I cannot identify the number, no? Okay. But according to them ha, mas marami daw solute concentration ang ating katawan. That is why pumapasok daw yung tubig sa skin. Now, para di mag-burst daw, I don't know if it's, I think parang baliktad, no? But then again, para daw hindi mag-burst yung skin cells, ang ginagawa niya is parang yung i-wrinkled na siya para meron pang spaces in between. I do not know really. I cannot identify man the number of solute, no, sa dagat at saka yung solute concentration on the inside. Okay. Is that clear, everybody?
yes po, sir.
Okay.
Yes po,
Again,
sir.
ang titingnan natin, pagdating natin sa osmosis, ang titingnan natin ay ang concentration ng solute. Okay? Yan yung dapat nating malaman. Kung saan ang mas maraming solute concentration, doon pupunta ang tubig. Not necessarily tubig, but the solvent. Klaro? Klaro ba? Yes. So it's more on the concentration of the solute. Yes, dear. So it actually depends on the solute concentration. Okay? Any more questions? Any more questions? None?
None, sir.
Okay. So if you don't have any questions, I will now stop the recording. Okay,